Let me tell you about a night that will be etched in my memory forever. It was a dark and stormy night, and I was on my shift at the Hotel de Austerlitz, an old and decaying place that always had an air of mystery about it. The wind was howling and the rain was falling in torrents, making the hotel's facade look even more ghostly in the flickering light of the lightning. The lobby was shrouded in a damp twilight, with the smell of old wood and mildew lingering in the air, as if the building itself was holding its breath. It was then that the door opened and a figure appeared in the entrance, bringing with it a breath of cold wind and a bit of relief from the stifling heat of the lobby. He was an elegant man, but the storm had left his clothes drenched and his leather suitcase seemed to have traveled the world. There was something unsettling about the way he moved, as if he were a character from another era. His eyes were tired, but their gleam revealed a mystery I couldn't decipher. He approached the counter and made a request that sent a shiver down my spine. He wanted room 13. Ah, room 13. I had always heard stories about that room. Rumors of strange things happening there, things that no one could explain. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the tension rise, but as part of the job, I handed him the key. His look, almost defiant, left me with the feeling that he knew exactly what he was doing and that something sinister was about to happen. He headed to the elevator, and I watched him as he walked down the poorly lit corridor. The lights flickered due to the storm, casting unsettling shadows on the walls, and each of his steps seemed to resonate with an intensity that only increased my discomfort. When he reached room 13 and the key turned in the lock, a peculiar sound filled the silence of the corridor, followed by the final click of the door closing. It was as if the hotel itself had exhaled a sigh of relief. I wondered what exactly was about to happen that night. Something told me that the simple act of choosing room 13 had triggered a series of events that no one there could foresee. And so, with the door closing, the mystery began to unfold, and I felt increasingly entangled in that web of secrets and shadows. As the storm raged outside, I remained silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, with the rain beating against the lobby windows and the distant sound of thunder filling the atmosphere with a sense of foreboding. As the minutes passed, my unease only grew. Room 13 had been sealed, and something in the air seemed to carry a palpable anticipation. Finally, the clock struck midnight, and although the hotel was generally quiet, there was a strange feeling in the air. I knew the traveler was in room 13, but what was he doing there? Curiosity and fear began to mix in my mind. I decided to check what was going on. Even knowing I shouldn't, the sense that something was wrong was almost unbearable. With the key in hand, I made my way down the corridor. The rain was still pouring heavily, and the lightning cast dancing shadows on the walls of the dimly lit hallway. Each step seemed amplified by the absolute silence, and the sound of the worn carpet beneath my feet was my only companion on this walk. The corridor seemed longer than usual, its walls adorned with ancient tapestries that seemed to watch my every move with invisible eyes. When I finally reached the door of room 13, my heart was pounding in my chest. The doorknob, old and worn, seemed to carry the weight of years of secrets. I hesitated before turning the key in the lock, feeling a chill down my spine. The sound of the lock mechanism turning and the click of the door opening seemed amplified in the quiet of the corridor. The room was in complete darkness, with the only light coming from a candle that still burned, casting a flickering glow. What I saw upon entering the room was even more disturbing. The The space was perfectly arranged, as if the traveler had just left. The bed was made, the furniture in its place, and the room seemed strangely normal. But there was something that stood out. A letter lay on the table, written in a language I didn't recognize. The paper was yellowed, and the words, though visibly old, were impossible for me to read. I pulled out the chair and looked around, trying to understand if there was anything else that could explain the traveler's behavior. However, what drew my attention the most was the journal I found hidden in a secret drawer in the wardrobe. The cover was dusty and worn, and when I opened it, I found pages filled with notes in hasty handwriting. The words spoke of a search for an ancient artifact, something that seemed to have a deep and dangerous significance. There were strange drawings and enigmatic symbols scattered across the pages, and the feeling that there was something more behind that journal was almost palpable. As I examined the journal and the letter, the silence around me seemed to intensify. The wind outside was still howling, and the distant thunder rumbled, but I was immersed in a world of mystery and desperation. What was happening in this room? What had the traveler discovered or done? The sense that something much larger was at stake was undeniable. I closed the journal and the drawer, and as I left the room, a feeling of unease took hold of me. What I had just witnessed seemed like it was only the beginning. The hotel, with its old walls and persistent shadows, now seemed to carry a weight greater than I could understand. I was about to delve into a mystery that defied logic itself, and the feeling that the traveler's fate was deeply intertwined with the hotel had never been clearer. The next morning, as the hotel finally began to stir, there was an air of unease that hung over it, almost as if the building itself was waiting to reveal its secret. The clock at the reception marked breakfast time, but the traveler had still not emerged from room 13. I knew something was wrong. The receptionist, an elderly man who knew the hotel's stories well, didn't seem very surprised by the situation, but his expression showed that he was concerned. I decided to go to room 13 once again to check if there was anything abnormal. With the key in hand, I headed down the corridor. The silence was nearly absolute, interrupted only by the distant sound of the storm still raging outside. Upon reaching the door, I used the spare key to unlock it. The sound of the lock turning felt like the prelude to something much more sinister. When I entered, what I saw was even more disturbing than before. The room was immaculately arranged, as if no one had spent the night there. The bed was perfectly made, the furniture aligned, and everything in place. But something was odd. The letter and the journal I had found earlier were missing. The place seemed untouched, except for a small detail. A drawer was slightly ajar, and on the nightstand there was a small box that looked old and peculiar. The box was made of a dark, glossy material with intricate patterns engraved on its surface. When I opened it, I found inside an amulet made of a metal that seemed to reflect light in a supernatural way. The amulet was adorned with the same symbols I had seen in the journal. It seemed to have been waiting a long time to be found, and the sensation I felt upon touching it was a chill that seemed to go beyond mere physical touch. It was as if an invisible presence was watching me. At that moment, the feeling of unease intensified. I decided to investigate the hotel's history and the events surrounding that room. I asked the receptionist for any additional information, and after a long hesitation, he revealed some old stories I hadn't heard before. The hotel had been built on the site of an ancient convent, and legends said that the artifact described in the journal, the amulet, was a powerful object that had been hidden there to protect its secrets. Supposedly, Those who attempted to find it would end up in desperate situations. The stories became more detailed. The amulet was not just a mystical object. It was said to have the ability to grant great powers, but at a terrible cost. People who tried to claim the artifact in the past were never seen again, and the hotel, with its dark past, served as a repository for such mysteries. The discovery that the amulet had been there all along only heightened the sense of danger that loomed over the place. Then the pieces began to fall into place. The traveler, with his enigmatic behavior and quest for Room 13, had been seeking exactly what was hidden there, the amulet. Perhaps he had managed to find it before disappearing. The sense that he was in danger was no longer just a supposition. It had become an oppressive certainty. I found myself in the midst of a plot that stretched across generations, with the hotel as the stage for a story of power and tragedy. I stepped away from the room, feeling a growing weight on my shoulders. The search for the artifact was far from over, and the presence of the amulet in the hotel seemed to have attracted a much greater force, something beyond my control. The traveler's disappearance and the appearance of the amulet were just the beginning of a series of events that could change everything I thought I knew about the Hotel de Austerlitz and its dark past. With the revelation of the amulet, the Hotel de Austerlitz seemed to have become a battleground between invisible and sinister forces. Every step I took down the corridor carried the weight of the discoveries I had made. The amulet, with its strange symbols and disturbing glow, seemed to pulse with an energy that defied logic. I decided to conduct one last investigation. I went to the hotel's archive, a dusty and forgotten place where the old records were kept. There was something about the hotel's past that I needed to understand. I sifted through yellowed documents, letters, and diaries from the time when the convent was built. The research revealed that the convent had been founded by a secret order that practiced mystical rituals in search of powers beyond human comprehension. Among the papers, I found a diary of one of the priests, with notes about an artifact that could alter reality itself. The descriptions were disturbing. The artifact, which later became the amulet, was hidden to protect the world from its destructive power. The order had predicted that if anyone tried to find it, cataclysmic events could be triggered. The priest mentioned that in an attempt to hide the artifact, he sealed the convent in a desperate bid to protect the world. The hotel, built on the convent's foundations, carried the shadow of that secret. With the new information, I returned to the room, determined to find answers. When I entered, the atmosphere felt different. There was a sensation of being watched. The air was heavy, almost as if the very space was pulsing with unknown energy. The amulet was now in a different place from where I had last seen it, as if it had moved on its own. The feeling that something was about to happen was overwhelming. It was then that I heard a sound, a barely audible whisper, like a distant voice trying to communicate through a veil of darkness. The sound seemed to come from within the wall itself. I followed the sound until I found a hidden crack. With a mix of apprehension and determination, I pried open the crack and discovered a small secret room. Inside, there was a series of ritualistic objects and a number of writings in an ancient language. Among the items, I found a scroll that appeared to be an invocation ritual. The instructions were clear. The amulet had the power to open a portal to another dimension, but only if used at a specific moment, during a rare celestial conjunction. The date was approaching, and the ritual had to be performed for the portal to open completely. The realization that the traveler, in his quest, might have activated a ritual to summon something beyond human comprehension was terrifying. The conclusion became evident. The traveler's disappearance and the disturbing events were not just coincidences. They were part of a deeper, darker plan. The amulet was not just a lost artifact, but the key to something that could threaten not just the hotel but the entire world. The atmosphere in the hotel was now charged with a palpable tension. The hotel itself seemed to be preparing for something. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. The hotel was about to reveal a secret that could have devastating consequences, and I was at the center of this nightmare. As I prepared to leave and alert the authorities, one final sensation of unease took hold of me. The certainty that the real horror was just beginning and that the Hotel de Austerlitz was merely the stage for an event that would challenge everything we know about reality. As I left room 13, the sense of urgency intensified. The hotel seemed alive, as if it knew time was running out. I decided that seeking external help was the best way to deal with what was happening. However, something stopped me. The wind whistling through the cracks in the windows now had a more menacing tone. I felt that something was about to happen, something I couldn't control. When I tried to leave the hotel, a strange feeling of paralysis overtook me. The exit doors were locked, and an invisible force seemed to keep me inside. With every attempt to open a door, the wind roared louder, as if protesting my escape. The hotel was now shrouded in deep darkness, and the corridors seemed to stretch infinitely, as if reshaping themselves with every step I took. As I wandered through the labyrinthine corridors, I sensed a presence. It was a shadow, something moving with a supernatural fluidity. This shadow seemed to be watching me, tracking my every movement with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. I was trapped, and the feeling of panic mixed with the certainty that time was running out. Eventually, I reached the reception, where the receptionist stood as if waiting for me. His gaze was vacant, almost as if he weren't really there, but a manifestation of the hotel itself. He approached and, with a calm and distant tone, said, "You can't leave. The ritual is complete." It was then that everything became clear. The traveler hadn't disappeared by accident. He had completed the necessary ritual to activate the portal. The amulet wasn't just a key, it was a catalyst for a transformation. Through the ritual, the hotel had aligned itself with a force beyond our reality. The hotel, the amulet, and the ritual were all part of a plan to open a portal to another dimension, a dimension that was now merging with our own. I tried to protest, but it was as if my voice was being muffled by reality itself. The receptionist disappeared, and the lobby transformed into a surreal scene. The walls twisted and stretched, and the sound of reality tearing echoed throughout the building. Light and shadow danced in a chaotic pattern, and the very structure of the hotel seemed to be falling apart. As the hotel disintegrated, I was sucked into an alternate reality. It was a place of darkness and chaos, where the laws of physics and logic did not apply. What I saw was a distorted universe, with landscapes and shapes that defied comprehension. The amulet had fulfilled its purpose, but at an unimaginable cost. What happened to me afterward is a matter of speculation. The hotel and the traveler vanished, and the city around us never heard from us again. The Hotel de Austerlitz, once known for its decadent charm and enigmatic atmosphere, was now just a nebulous memory. The amulet, the receptionist, and the ritual became legends, stories whispered among those who dared to investigate the unknown. And so, what began as a simple night in an old hotel ended in a journey beyond reality. The Hotel de Austerlitz fulfilled its role as the guardian of a secret that should never have been revealed. The story of the traveler, the amulet, and the ritual became a warning to all. Some doors are better left closed, and some secrets are deeper than the human mind can bear.